Okay, so here we are for the next episode of RPG 101, the character class overviews. And today we're going to be talking about bards. No, not that kind of bard, the other kind of bard. No, not that one either. Okay, bards are a specialty class. They are the very stereotypical jack of all trades but a master of none, which in D&D can be kind of a inaccurate description because you can master a skill. It's just that bards get a lot of them. So what is the bard specifically? Well, the bard falls under the context of a utility class. They're not really a frontline fighter, and they're not really a magic user, and they're not really a thief, although in the original editions what became the bard was the fighter, thief, mage multi-class. And for those of you who played first and second edition D&D, you remember these. You know, it was an actual class, fighter, mage, thief. And it eventually morphed into what we know and love today as the bard. Now, bards are kind of seen as, you don't really need them. You know, you don't need a fighter if you have a fighter or a paladin in your group. You don't need a mage if you have a wizard or a sorcerer in your group. And you don't need a thief if you have a rogue. But what if you have all of those people in your class already, plus a cleric, and you still have one more person in your playing group? Well, the best thing to do would be to suggest to them, instead of doubling up on a class, which is perfectly alright, have them play a bard, because you never know. So, why should you play a bard? Well, bards are really good fighters. They may not be as good as a fighter or a paladin, people who have been trained in war, but they're really light on their feet, and they're really, really good with light weapons. They're the swashbuckler of all the stories. If you really want to take a look at it, watch any pirate movie and Three Musketeers. Those could be bards, especially Aramis from the Three Musketeers. Aramis was the priest, wasn't he? Anyway, they also are decent magicians. If you need just a few extra spells in the group, whether they be buffs or attack spells, a bard would be great instead of having to have another entire wizard or sorcerer join the group. And let's say that the rogue gets captured, but you have locks that need picked. Bards get, on the old editions, they get those skills. They got lock picking, they got trap finding and things like that. And 5th edition, I've yet to see anything that makes the bards even weaker. 5th edition, actually, I kind of like the bard. So, what's the downside to bards? Well, like I said at the beginning of the video, bards are kind of a jack of all trades. So that means if you want to be really good at one of your skills, you're going to have to give the others to the wayside. So let's say you want to be a bard that focuses on fencing and swashbuckling. You want to become the dread pirate Roberts. You're going to have to let your magic skills slide a little bit. You're going to have to let your other skills slide because you want to focus mostly on sword fighting, on defense, on all of these things. And if you're playing 5th edition, you know that you get the option to use feats or not. So if I ever mention a feat in here, you have to forgive me. In 3rd edition, you would have to focus on skills that focused on your combat and defense abilities. You would have to take, weapon focus, weapon finesse, all of these things. Things that in 5th edition, fortunately, and another reason why I like 5th edition, you get those automatically. The weapons have been separated into light one-handed and light finesse. And that gives you the option, just like the feat did, to use your strength or your dex bonus to it. Another downside to bards are they only can wear up to a certain amount of armor. Over that, and they start losing their spells, they start losing their skills due to armor check penalties and things of that nature. But at the same time, bards have always been typically a light armored, light on their feet person. Something else, the bard spells list is a little restrictive compared to wizards or sorcerers or even witches. And again, that's because they have a specialized focus, but they kind of don't. So you're sitting there and all of this, you have to weigh if you want to be a spell slinging bard, if you want to be a combat bard, or if you want to be a sneaky Lando Calrissian type of rogue. Those are the kind of things you got to look out for when you choose to play a bard. Now, what are some of the positive things about playing bards? If you're in a party and you're the bard, you can buff your players not just using spells, but by using your bardic music. And I've got to tell you, there are so many things your bardic music can overcome. You can inspire greatness. You can inspire competence. You can inspire all sorts of acts of heroism. You can dispel fear effects. You can dispel mind-affecting spells if they have a sonic component. To a degree, there are limits. You can use them to drive fear into your opponents at higher levels with war chants and things like that. Bards, by nature, are performers, whether they be singers, instrumentalists, orators, dancers. Any of these things can be used for bardic performance. And there has never been a time that I've seen a bard who knew what they were doing fail at anything they were doing. I've seen bards use their countersong ability, which is an amazing ability, to completely nullify an ongoing effect of a sonic thing, where people were being enchanted by the sound of the caster's voice. One bard can stand up there, start using countersong to interfere with the sound, and all of those party members get a save. Specific rules do apply, and they're different in each edition. But countersong is a very, very powerful and very useful thing for bards. So if you want to play a bard, look at countersong and decide if that is something you could use very, very effectively. Another thing they get is they get spells specifically with buffs and heals and some combat things, but not a whole bunch, because they get access to mass spells, which are spells that affect multiple targets at once, a little bit earlier than most wizards do. And like I stated earlier, one of the best things that bards get are they are the only arcane caster in the core classes that get access to healing spells. Clerics get them, paladins get them, druids get them, and now the arcane classes get healing spells through the bard. Now in 5th edition, spells are a little different. Now instead of having a healing spell every so many levels, like they used to, cure light, cure moderate, cure medium, things like that, now you have a single spell, cure, and it's a 1st level spell. You want to cast a cure spell, but you need a little bit more than the standard magic? Cast it as a higher spell slot. Take that 1st level spell and cast it in the 5th level slot, and the magic healing amplifies to match that slot. That is one of the best things I've seen in 5th edition. And I know I'm harping on 5th edition a lot, but I've been playing it with my group right now, and it's a little odd, and I'll get into that in another video. But overall, I'm seeing fewer problems and fewer difficulties in this edition than I saw in 4th edition, because 4th edition was just all sorts of weird. But bards, between their healing, between their buffs and spells, and their buffs and songs, and their basic combat ability, and their basic ability to do sneaky rogue type things, they are a great, great addition to any party. So what do you want to do as a bard? Well, primarily as a bard, if you roll random stats that you can place anywhere you want, you want to place your highest stat in charisma, because the charisma is what the bard's magic is fueled by. They're fueled by charisma just like a sorcerer All of the Bard's relevant skills are charisma based. All of your spells use your charisma modifier for DCs. Charisma wants to be your highest stat. Your next highest stat, probably you want to decide between dexterity and constitution. Do you want to be more nimble? You know, are you going to be tumbling and dancing for your bardic skill, or are you going to be wanting to be where you can take a couple of hits if you're not quite as nimble? So dex and con would probably be your next highest stats, along with intelligence and wisdom, and then strength. You don't have to be really buff to be a bard, especially if your primary role in your party is to buff the party and to dispel enchantments. If you're not going to be toe-to-toe with the orc with the great axe, you don't need to have a huge strength. Especially if you're wielding a rapier, and then you can use your dex, which, frankly, a lot of times using a dex with a rapier makes more sense because it is a nimble weapon. It's a very thin-bladed weapon, very nimble. So from there, you just decide on your character. Like I said in my character creation videos way back when, choose a backstory. And from that backstory, choose your weapons, choose your armor, choose your method of bardic performance. Are you going to be a traveling minstrel? Are you going to be a poet? Are you going to be an orator who recites great speeches from momentous occasions of the past? Are you going to be a dancer who dances in the street for their supper? These are all types of performers that bards can be. And going even deeper into that, that's why bards go out and adventure, because they want to hear a new story. They want to learn a new dance. They want to learn a new speech. They want to learn a new story. They want to hear more about a battle that they've only heard dim recollections of. They want to get more and more and more. They want to learn. They want more things to perform because they have incurable wanderlust. Whenever I play a bard, I just want to travel. I can't stay in one place for too long. Whether it's because I get in trouble with the law or because I hear about these great things going on in another town, it depends on how I build the character. But bards learn and continue the oral traditions that a lot of us have lost with the advent of the printed word and television, radio. Oral traditions are something we don't really understand in this day and age. Oral traditions that are still used in very remote tribes, in jungles and plains, even places, there are even some cultures that, even though they have access to the printed word and radio and television, CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray, streaming media, things like that, they still practice oral tradition because it's so ingrained in their culture. These are what bards do. They find these oral traditions and they take these stories and they spread them. Why did they decide to become a bard? It could be any number of reasons. Maybe they were in an inn one day and they heard a bard tell these inspiring stories and saw how charismatic they were and how the crowd loved them, and maybe that sparked the urge for them to be just as well liked. Or they heard about these stories and they wanted to go out and experience them for themselves. Sometimes the best story is one you've lived through. So I've mentioned a couple of times bards are kind of a jack of all trades but a master of none, but that doesn't mean that they're useless. You know, a bard with a rapier and a 16, 17 dexterity can be pretty devastating in a fight. Bards with a pretty good wit and a high charisma score, just any of you that have access to a handbook, look at the low-level spells that the bards have. Third edition, Pathfinder, 5th edition, they all get some pretty nifty spells at low levels. I once, when I was DMing a game, the adventurers got to the mid boss of my little campaign, and it was a bard. He was a bard that was only 2 levels higher than they were, but because of those 2 levels gave him access to more spells, it was a tough fight. A lot of you that play wizards look at the sleep spell and just go, sleep. Reread it. You can put up to X number of hit dice of people to sleep if they fail their save. And if you're DMing a game and your NPC has access to sleep and you don't use it, you're playing him wrong. Sleep is something in my games that my characters are deadly afraid of now. Because they can, against this bard, the very first thing he did was cast sleep, put the rogue to sleep, put the fighter to sleep. Now you've got a paladin and a mage. The next spell he used was dominate. Paladin became his. Paladins are fairly good at taking on spellcasters because of their high will saves and everything, but the dice just weren't with them that day. And bards, especially if you choose your spells known carefully, load your bard out proper, just like you would a wizard. Wizards, since you only get so many spells per day and only so many spells known, you spend time as you build a wizard sitting there going, oh, this spell or this spell. Bards are just as careful about their spell selections because they know to use a MMO term, they're crowd control. They can be a good tank or secondary tank. They're pretty good DPS. They can be a good backup heal, but what they excel at is crowd control. If you're facing a big group of enemies, have the wizard or the sorcerer and the bard tag team them with sleep. Or if they're of sufficient levels, tag team them with area of effect destruction spells. Fireball, Fireball cantrip from 5th edition, Burning Hands, Magic Missile. These spells are what are accessible to both classes. And I need to play bards more. You know, people that know me, I was a musician for years. I still am in some respects. I composed the music for these shows. But I never really played bards all that much. I mean, I use them every now and again in my campaigns as NPCs, you know, backup characters or villains or just random people. But I've never really sat down as a player and played a bard. And it's something that I need to do that more often. I played a bard way back when, but the campaign kind of fell apart after 2 sessions, and I never really got to experience all that a bard could be until I started using them as NPCs. So, in essence, what is a bard? Well, a bard's a great utility character. They can fill gaps if your wizard's out or you don't have a wizard. They can fill gaps if you don't have a rogue or the rogue's preoccupied with being in jail and hasn't broken themselves out yet. They can back up the fighter if there's a lot of enemies. They can run crowd control. They can run interference. They can buff the party, and their buffs are just pretty amazing things, especially with the bardic music. Since bardic music, as long as your character can hear or see the bard performing, be it a visual or auditory medium that they're performing in, the effect is active on you. And I need to double check for 5th edition, but I know in 3rd edition, bardic music effects, if he stopped for any reason, stopped chanting, stopped singing, stopped playing, the effect would go on for another couple of rounds. I mean, I believe it was dependent on level, but don't quote me on that. So, you know, even if the bard gets knocked out or he has to stop to defend himself, there's still a few rounds that the characters get the effects of the buffs. And he can always start right back up again. So where do they stand in the 3 ranks of defense? I would always put them in the middle rank. You know, in front of the squishy cloth mage people, but behind the plate and chainmail wearers. And for utility classes, and there's a couple of utility classes that don't really fit any of the standard classes. Bards are one of them. Monks and rangers are kind of in there too. Clerics to a lesser degree, because they do have access to all the divine healing. But as far as utility class players, if you're tired of playing a certain class and you want to try something new, but you don't really know what, give a bard a chance. You know, be a minstrel, be a dancer. Go out there, have some fun.